Well, Dan,
Hi,
here we
Zanna.
are again. Thanks so much for joining me.
It's a pleasure.
It's been already 4 years,
Wow.
right? So we recorded a podcast during COVID times about your amazing book, Alive at Work. And today we're going to talk about human-centricity and how CEOs can really, live that culture and what can they concretely do to make that happen.
Mm-hmm.
But before we start, maybe just a short, what have you been up to the last 4 years?
Great. 4 years, can you
Only
imagine?
4 years.
I'll say that I'm still loving teaching. That feels really right to me. And London Business School gives me the chance to teach what I love and my own materials. So that's pretty addictive. I enjoy that a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm working on a new book right now. So it has to do, again, with the mind and how our brain processes the world.
Yeah.
But this time a lot more to do with how does it decide when to explore new territory versus exploit what we already know.
Okay. And do you want to share a bit more, or is it just too confidential yet?
Oh, it's not confidential in any way. But what I love is how at the end of the day there aren't organizations. They're just people.
Yeah.
And people can only make decisions based on what their brains take in from the world and how they process the world. And the newest neuroscience research really makes it clear that we create these hallucinations of the world, models of the world, and we have to act based on that. And what I'm really trying to understand is why it's so common or so typical that we seem to model uncertainty as threat.
Yeah.
We hallucinate threat when in fact that's an unproductive hallucination in a world that changes a lot.
Yeah.
But it's built in, it's wired in.
Yeah.
And it appears that parents and humble leaders can co-regulate the hallucination.
Really?
Yeah, it appears that you can create a different way of literally seeing the world so that when things are uncertain, you can be curious instead of threatened.
Nice.
But at a core base level, it's subconscious. You don't try to do that. Your brain does that.
Yeah.
And it feeds you a hallucination that's more productive in today's world.
I think that's nice because I think humble leadership is already direct link to what we're going to talk about, right?
Yes.
So
yeah, it fits really well.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, do you have an idea of why it's connected to humble leadership? Why not other types of leadership also can sort of change the perception?
I think it could. So first off, it's not as though I think it's the only thing. What I'm becoming really intrigued by is how humble leadership seems to start with a learning orientation. What a humble leader starts with is how can I learn from the people around me instead of how can I get the people around me to do what I want. Like, I have the answer. Now I have to get all these bozos to do it right.
Yeah.
And a humble leader says, I know what I'm trying to create in terms of an impact. I don't know the answer. I don't really do any work. I have to get all these people that have skills to help me.
Yeah.
And I think that setting difference causes a whole stream of interactions when you encounter surprise.
Yeah.
Because for a humble leader, surprise is, okay, now how will we continue along the path to the vision?
Yeah.
The impact still is what we need to create, but how do we pivot, or how do I get people motivated to help me?
It's more an exploration and a journey, right? Than
Yes,
something set in stone.
That's right.
Yeah.
Let me just say one last thing about this.
Yeah.
It's really, really clear based on this evidence that when people are feeling cortisol and fear and anxiety and threat, they overexploit. They set back into the models they already have. If you're able to see that with curiosity or with interest, you're more likely to try to learn more, and dig in and try to update your models about the world.
Yeah.
And to the extent that, let's go with a parent. You can create strong attachment so that the kids feel confident and secure, then they're more likely to go learn. And if they feel neurotic and they feel
Unsafe.
lost, unsafe, threatened, they don't go explore. They hang. They cling to the parent. And it's an unproductive way to live.
Yeah.
If you need to learn in order to be productive, then you need to go learn.
Would be nice, right? If you are able to learn in your lifetime, I would say. Yeah.
So anyway, thanks for asking.
Yeah, my pleasure.
With so many things, I love the topic enough that I almost don't want it to end.
Yeah.
I want to stay in the book because it's so joyous.
Yeah. But it's nice, right, that you're writing the book and you can probably continue at least. So I wrote a book, I think, in 2015, and it's still on the topic of CX transformation, right? So I'm still every day working with the content, working with people. So I think also with your new book, it's, at least what I feel, it's so energizing to create new materials, new content, I don't know, make new podcasts. So
teaching.
Exactly. Your journey doesn't end after you finish the book, right?
That's great.
Yeah. Okay, let's dive a little into human centricity, because I think it can be super abstract, right? But maybe just to define a bit from our perspective, I always like to say I use CX transformation not as an end goal, but as a means to an end. And for me, that end is to create human-centric culture. Still super abstract. For me, that's focusing on purpose, employees, and customers, right? So really the people side of organizations. I think that's where we both connect as well. So I think maybe it's nice to just first discuss why it also matters to you, or why you think it matters to organizations that want to flourish.
Right.
Why should human centricity be a thing?
That's great. Let me answer that in two ways.
Yes.
The first one's the way I really feel it, which is, why are we here? Not just you and I, but like, why are humans here?
What the bleep are we doing here?
Yes. It's sort of like, if you start with humanism, then we want to try to make this an exceptional experience where people can thrive.
Yeah.
And human centricity kind of starts with that, in a sense. And so doing things for the world that makes the world better, operate better, and then having an employee group that feels lit up to accomplish that, that's almost what purpose means. It's what are we here for?
Yeah.
And when you get that circle right, it's kind of like a self-flicking ice cream cone. It's like it keeps itself.
That's a nice visual. I haven't heard that one before.
Use it. Oh, I love that idea. But that's not the best answer when you're in a business school sometimes. So that's like for us. I actually don't say that much, because I think to date in particular, that came off as really flighty and unrealistic. And it turned CEOs right off.
Yeah.
The old ones. Even 10 years ago, and I really mean this, I would have been relegated to the corner at this point, because it's what they want is like return on invested capital.
Financial happening.
They want stock price appreciation. They want their yacht to pay. So the better answer in many cases is that there's a win-win here, that while the humans that work in the organization are thriving and doing their best, you can pay them less and get more and have them be happy.
It's win-win you could create,
win-win.
right?
Win-win. And then what that seems to do is connect. And you know this, of course. I'm just playing.
I think it's relevant for the listeners to hear about it.
I think that's what it really is. I think that what happens is when you develop that human centricity within the organization, you create a loyalty that goes beyond reason. They want to help you win. They're not following a script that you created so that they don't make mistakes. They're looking for ways to advance the organization's purpose and goals.
To be sincerely engaged, right?
That's it.
Yeah.
And so there's a sense in which you almost can't buy that.
Yeah.
You have to create it in non-financial ways.
Yeah.
That's human centricity. Then what they create is often very hard to duplicate, because what they're creating are genuine, authentic connections. They're building quality and innovation in every day. It's leadership in every seat. Everybody in the organization wants to be helping. And so the organization, the leaders, the senior leaders, they don't have to try to script that all out in advance. What comes out is something that the customers find compelling, but competitors have a hard time copying it.
Yeah.
Because how do you create loyalty beyond reason in your workforce quickly?
Yeah.
It's much easier to try to give a bonus.
Exactly.
But that's not it.
Yeah.
And so I love how it aids your pursuit of purpose, of impact, but it also creates barriers to competitors. And so that answer, I think, is considerably more compelling to a leader that is trying to double share price in the next 3 years, or inload a whole new customer base.
Yeah, I think it's nice because also for me, so my aim also with this podcast and just with what I'm doing every day is I tend to be a bit naive, right? Try to change the world a bit. So I love to focus on, let's say, the CEOs that feel there's this something there, this human-centric thing. But how, right? How do I do this? And if we scale that number of people, right, and we facilitate them, I think then we have a chance, right, to enhance the number of CEOs that are, yes, in the end, everything should be financialized, right? If human centricity doesn't, in the end, lead to something, then we should stop doing it. But it does. There's so much proof.
So can I ask you, you look for a litmus test of leaders that kind of already get it, and that's who you work with?
Yes, ideally, right? So ideally, at least they resonate with the idea.
Yeah.
But I'm curious if you see the same. In my perception, the last 5, maybe 10 is stretching it, but the last 5 years I feel, and I think maybe that's also connected to the new generations that are asking more for purpose. Maybe it's also the generation of CEOs now. So now, let's say it's my age, right? CEOs, that also maybe plays a role, that they are more open to learn. Literally, I had another podcast last time with the CEO that literally said, I don't have the answer, right? So exactly, he said, humble leadership, explore, but he's convinced that this human-centric thing, this purpose thing is the way to go. Mm-hmm. And what really brought me hope is last, I think, 2 weeks, I read, maybe you know it, the book Heart of Business.
No, I've not read that one.
I think you will like it as well. It's from Hubert Joly, I think I pronounced it in French. But he's a former McKinsey consultant, so was super financially driven, did all the MBAs. And then he went on this profound journey himself as well, and he took over Best Buy. And he transformed it from financially really being almost bankrupt through purpose, through people. So again, a beautiful case where human centricity led to like super financial success.
Yeah.
So I'm hopeful that we're moving into sort of this new stage where we can inspire more and more CEOs to have the courage. I think it's a courage thing, right?
It's a courage to trust that people can do great things without a script. Sometimes I'm thinking about an organization I know of that sells cell phones here in London. They have loads and loads of the stores, the outlets. And there was this one store that was always performing the worst, top 5% all the time, and hundreds of stores. It's always at the bottom. And they tried all kinds of normal things, financial metrics, financial motivations, creating bonuses, still on the bottom. And they hired in a consulting firm that went in and just started talking with the employees like humans, like what matters to you, and why do you think you're in the lowest category, and what would help you improve their game. And I'm not going to tell you too much about it, but what happened was that same store, after they listened and put very cheap, inexpensive solutions in place, little things like a fridge in the back room where we could keep our things. Let us not wear these weird tags, like let us make our own tags, little things. It didn't really cost much money. It went from being in the bottom 5% to being the second most profitable store. Same people, same location, same products.
Yeah.
And when
it's a
you
system,
see
right?
That, when you see it, it's almost inspiring what can happen. And I do agree with you that CEOs in the world are ready for this now. It's like there's a zeitgeist or something. It's like it's in the air that not only is this profitable, but it just makes life better.
It's more fun, right?
It's more fun. So it's funny how finally, I used to not be able to even use the P word.
Yeah.
Like when I started, it was back in 95.
Yeah.
And the P word is profit. It wasn't purpose.
It wasn't purpose, exactly.
They worked against each other. It literally was seen as like, all that bullshit with purpose, it's going to hit my bottom line. It was the exact opposite of how we're seeing it now.
We don't have time for purpose.
Yes. After we get enough profits, then we'll think about doing a bit of purpose. Could you imagine, Zanna?
Yeah.
But that's not so long ago, really.
No, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I think so. And maybe it's just you and I being naive and want the world to work like that.
I like to be naive.
Let's focus there.
For
yeah,
sure.
me too. Yeah. At least try, right? Try and see if it works. Okay, so since we are focusing on the CEO who have the courage but are figuring out, okay, how can I do this human centricity? Maybe we can just walk through the 3 pillars, like purpose, employees, and customers.
Great.
And just have maybe a mix of where you see, hey, science have proven indeed that this brings results. But also, what are some tips that I as a CEO can do to make purpose more central to the organization, to inspire employees, just to make it a bit tangible for them?
And it's worth the listeners and the watchers remembering that I have an expertise more in the human centricity within organizations, employee. How do we manage the inside of the organization? I love the idea that how we affect the inside of the organization spills out into the world and has that impact. I know quite a bit about that, but that's more you in some ways. I think that's your expertise. And then...
But they've already been able to listen to many of my podcasts, so let's focus on your perception today.
that is what makes the most sense. And then the final thing that's kind of interesting is the purpose is all woven in there. It's not as though the end purpose is just the money, is it? It's both about like how do we run an organization where people are proud to work there, because then that makes us a good player in society, which means in society will like us. So that's not why you set up the business, but it certainly helps the organization succeed and thrive in terms of its outputs and its ability to stay relevant.
Yeah.
So
for me, also the storyline is that the three, right? So purpose, employees, and why do I always use the three? Because they're so connected. So from our research, we saw that the number one driver for customer tends to be the human aspect. But now we've proved, and that human aspect is directly connected to the sense of purpose of employees. So that's how the three are always beautifully working together. But you have some concrete tips. So let's say I'm a CEO, I'm inspired.
Yeah.
What are maybe three things I can do to put purpose more in the center of what we're doing?
Probably the one that I'm most keen to help organizations with is personalizing the purpose so that it's not a slogan or a catchphrase or a website. It's something where the employees feel how it's relevant to their own life. And so like a really easy one that many organizations are now doing is let the customers do your motivation for you. So you put the employees much, much closer in touch with the impact of their work. And so lots of little examples, but if it's Microsoft and you have a new client, rather than trying to have a point of contact and a bunch of consultants figure out what the hospital is going to need to do to go paperless, take the team of programmers that's going to create the paperless solution on site and interview nurses and doctors and scheduling assistants and janitors and say, how will going paperless hurt you? What are you worried about? The actual end users. And let them, the programmers that are going to move the cursor across the screen and do code, let them hear what the threats, the concerns, the worries, the needs are, because that injects them with the why. The CEO doesn't have to talk about a beautiful pitch. You're talking to real humans that have to do work, and then I can help you do your work.
You see the impact immediately, right?
And that helps them innovate because they know why we're doing this. It helps them care because they know why. There's an enormous power and purpose for a human being. You know this and I know this, but let's say it out loud. We are a creature that likes to have a story about why we're doing what we're doing. You could say we need it. You could say the prefrontal cortex of our brain, it's a language meaning machine, and it's hungry to know what are we doing and why. It needs some kind of messaging around that. And if you personalize purpose, you give it an answer to that question. And it's visceral, it's compelling, it's emotional, all real as opposed to a website with a slogan that the CEO and his top team or her top team developed. And I think a lot of leaders haven't gotten that part yet. It's more of a grassroots purpose that you need, not sort of a top level. So it's not a sales job.
Exactly.
Another thing I'll put out, and then maybe I'll hit pause and we can chat about it. There's this thing that I've been doing with some companies where you just have employees think about the tasks on their job. Like, what is the job description? What are the different tasks? And then for each one of them, ask, why do I do this 4 times? So it's like this. I have to grade papers. Because I have 80 MBAs and they do a final, it's 10 pages.
Super energizing, I can see.
It's tough. First 5 are fun. The next 5 are like, okay, 70 more now. Sometimes it's hard to remember the purpose when there's repetition. So for me, I can do this. I do this. Okay, why am I doing this? I'm doing this to give feedback. It's not just that I have to do this. Do this because I want them to have some feedback about, did you do well or not? And you say, well, why do you care if they get feedback? And then you can, be like, oh, well, I want them to get better. Learn. Well, why do you care if they get better? Why do you care if they learn? Well, then now we're getting somewhere, aren't we? Well, I want them to be better leaders. I teach people that are going to be leaders. Why do you care if they're better leaders? If I want to put more living into life. I want them to be humble leaders that create impact. And so all of a sudden I'm excited again. But not really. I'm not so naive to think that this little mind game changes the playing field. But I can tell you that for me, I have to remember and re-motivate myself.
If change the energy with which you're doing it,
that's
right?
It. But if I look the other way and just get into the rut, it starts to depersonalize me and the quality of my feedback and the work itself because I'm just trying to get through it. And if you just take that tiny little example and you apply it to every single employee and the boss, the leader, he or she could just have a conversation about the different parts of the role and why do you feel like you do it? Well, why does it ultimately matter for you? And if the answer is because it's the job, I have to, that's not very inspired. So can we find a more inspiring answer there? If we work together, could we develop a better story?
Yeah. And I also, what also resonated with me is that I thought you were going in a different direction because where I think if you would do the exercise, let's say I'm a call center agent. And I answer calls. Maybe I need to have my quality conversations about the chats that I've had. Because I think it's also super interesting exercise because then I think when you do that with each employee, you get a lot of, why the bleep are we doing this activity? Right? So I think it's also a great way to not only find purpose, but in parallel, find waste and just let employees think, hey, indeed, but why are we doing this? I think we could better do activity X, Y, Z.
That's a great story.
I think that combination is a really strong one.
Once upon a time, I was working with the U.S. Navy. There was this group of folks who put together like accounting reports 4 times a year.
Yeah.
Here's where the money goes. Here's the impact of that money. When I was working with them, I said, so who's using this? And they go, we don't know. And I was like, what do you mean you don't know? And they're like, well, there's decisions that have to get made out there, but like we don't know them. What we have to do is put together these data. We have to assemble all these files and create these charts. We have to make sure the data is right. We have to make it usable.
Yeah.
So I went and found some of the people that use that. They make decisions and brought them in. It's this thing I just talked about.
Yeah.
And at first it was kind of like working really well. Because this user, this sort of decision maker is like, we just used this last week. This chart is kind of how we make this decision. People are like puffing up a little bit. They're feeling good about it. And this one guy goes like, what about this one? And probably it was his, And they go, no, we don't use that one.
Ouch.
And you could just see his face. So again, he's like, what do you mean? He's like, well, we don't know why you put that one in there. He's like, we don't put that one in there. It's for you. And he's like, no, it's not. So all of a sudden, we found waste. As we went through, there's 15, 20%.
It's their internal customer, right? Yeah.
It's here's what it was. Some 4-star admiral, 12 years ago, asked for this chart pivot.
Yeah.
And then everybody inside assumed that's what they want from now on.
Yeah.
And so for 12 years, 4 times a year, they're making a chart that nobody looked at.
Also, efficiency-wise, right? It's crazy. Taking so much time to make this thing every day. I also remember that I think like 15 years ago, I was also working with complaints management. And it takes a lot of time to make the complaints report every month, right? And they were sort of saying, I'm not sure if it's being used enough. I said, let's do an experiment. Let's one time don't send the complaints report and see how many questions you get. Hey, I'm waiting for the complaints report.
This is perfect.
How many responses do you think you get?
Did you get
0?
Same phenomenon.
Exactly.
And this is what organizations are good at, which is building in excess rather than stripping away excess.
Yeah.
We add and add and add as opposed to what's needed to do the job.
Yeah.
And that's bureaucracy and hierarchy.
Yeah.
It's levels, it's job descriptions, it accretes garbage, doesn't it? It takes on things that if you were starting the company, you wouldn't do it.
No, you would start from scratch,
needed.
right? Yeah, exactly.
What's the need?
But I think that's also a really nice bridge because one of the topics we were also talking about is, hey, okay, let's assume I'm the CEO, really inspired to go this human-centric way, but I have other CXOs next to me that maybe are more financially driven or more numbers driven. I think one of the perfect ways to convince them is that there's so much efficiency to be gained, right? So much cost to be reduced with doing these wasteful things of indeed enhancing loyalty of customers. But if I'm the CEO and I need to manage a lot of different stakeholders, do you have any specific tips or experiences or cases where I feel, hey, this is a really good way to also engage the rest of your C-level colleagues?
C-level colleagues. Well, some organizations have the C-level colleagues do the work that they then have to lead. So you put them on the call center floor.
Yeah.
And it cuts right to the chase then because all these sort of new techie gadgets that maybe sound great at the top level, but when you're actually functioning, there's too much lag or it's too hard to use while you're having the conversation or you can't pull up the customer information because you want to lock.
Yeah.
They get a chance to remember that it's not theoretical.
Yeah.
And
it's not fluffy.
It's not fluffy. And it's also, what I mean is, I think a lot of times without trying, leaders, and maybe all of us, we get locked into strategic thinking. Here's a way that we could make things work better, but it's not grounded in the reality of
the daily work of employees.
Yeah, what gets done and how real people have to move their arms and legs and mouths to create value for the customer. And if you don't ever get back to that, so I'm being a little flip in saying we should all eat our own dog food. Leaders should go and do the work.
Yeah.
In the same way that like my dean could go teach a class.
Yeah.
And just kind of remember that like all this tech, it sounds really good, but it has to work in service of a good experience.
Yeah.
It can't just be something that we put on the website as like new tech.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that actually is probably a possibility, but unless you made them do it, they wouldn't want to. And a lot of times they would think it was a waste of their time, which is a little weird. So that's one thing. Another thing, I guess, that they're, lots of people are convinced by is the beauty of these mini experiments, like little 3-week, let's not be convinced yet.
Yeah.
Let's try something and see what happens.
Yeah.
And a lot of times within 3 weeks, things start working better. They don't cost more. And so they see it in their own organization with their own employees that if we did more of that, there's not much downside. The employees seem happier doing it, and the customers seem happier that we're doing it.
It's not costing extra, so let's go.
Let's go.
Yeah.
What do you think, Zanna, what do you think holds leaders from embracing things that in the evidence, in the literature, it works?
Yeah.
We probably have 30 years now of really good evidence that it's just not convincing enough to them. They're still living in a different model. What do you think that model is?
Yeah, I still think so. Indeed, also when I started like almost 25 years ago with the whole customer centricity topic, it was also a lot about, you can reduce retention. It's way cheaper to retain a customer than get a new one. So there was a lot of financial proof. The same with purpose now, right? The same with creating employee engagement. I think still the key problem is that the sales, I can see tomorrow. The operational cost, I can see tomorrow. I cannot see tomorrow the effect of more purpose. I cannot see tomorrow the more effect of financial effect of retaining customers. Yeah. So I think everybody, and I think the whole, of course, being on a stock exchange is only accelerating that, right? It's such a short-term focus. And I think that's also one of the reasons why we tend to focus, let's prove. So every time we manage to prove within 3 months that you can seriously enhance satisfaction of customers. Because what I see, and maybe you see the same, is that indeed we no longer need to convince people of the financial impact of human centricity, of purpose, of employees, of customers. They are convinced. McKinsey, everybody has proven this by now. But, right, it's still a but. And I think that but is indeed in how can we, I think exactly what you mentioned, how can we prove in short time frame, in pilots and experiments that indeed actually works and it doesn't take a year before you see effect. I think we really need to cross that bridge.
A thought that just went through my mind right now is how if leaders buy into this new approach, what they're really buying into is a model that says that human emotions, employee emotions, yield the financial results and the profits.
It's a consequence, right?
For some people, that is still a step.
Yeah.
And it's giving up a control. Because I know that even 10 or 15 years ago, business was cognitive and rational, kind of transactional, and this isn't that.
Yeah, exactly.
This is being a bit naive and inspired. And it's caring, which brings emotions and the heart in. And
it's giving confidence to others, right?
Here's a quick story. It's a study. It was published in Operations Management Journal. And it was chefs. And it was in Boston. And there were 100 short order chefs in restaurants. And in this study, Ryan Buell was the researcher. He allowed half of them to see the customers just using a video camera and an iPad. So they just put an iPad above the cook station. And so now half of them randomly assigned could see who they were making their eggs for. And the customers were 13% happier with the food. And the employees were almost 20% more engaged in their work. It didn't cost much money. It was just a matter of, instead of just making eggs, I'm making eggs for that woman or that man or that kid. And it changed, I guess. They're customizing it. That one wants it over easy. I'm listening better. They want it over medium. They want hard.
A little extra love in it, right?
A little extra. Well, who knows? So I actually don't know always why it changes things. Like, I don't know what behavior. Like, in this particular study, there were statistically less burgers that were cooked wrong and returned. So rework. That's a fact. That happened. it's just really interesting to think about what did the chefs do differently. Like they didn't really put more love in, but they probably just listened. You want it over medium, you want it over regular. I care more because I can see you.
I would say exactly. I care more because I'm not just making burgers for something abstract. I see Dan sitting there and I'm doing this for you. That, at least in my brain, makes absolute sense. Yeah.
But there's something, if you take that as a tiny example, and that's a proper study. That's published in journals, blind, peer-reviewed, blah, blah, blah. That's a real one.
And rework, by the way, efficiency gains again, right?
Yes.
So for the financial colleagues as well, a plus. Yeah.
And customers would be more likely to return because they were 13% happier.
Yeah.
Didn't really cost that much money.
Yeah.
So if you take that as like a microcosm of what we're talking about, then the question becomes, how can a leader become more creative and innovative about injecting purpose in a way that isn't a slogan? You're injecting it into the work itself. This is actually, Zanna, one of the points.
Yeah.
How does a leader design the work so that the work helps create the purpose? Same with the Microsoft example. By allowing them to connect with the end user, that means the end user's doing the heavy lifting. It's not the boss saying the magic words, the silver tongue, the perfect story. It allows it to be more grounded in the work itself. Another way to think of it is actually really interesting. Maybe that's the way you open the door to purpose and let it into the organization rather than trying to like fly a flag of purpose above the organization. That's what I worry about. Because right now,
it's more tangible, right? Yeah, I think so too. And I think what I also like is that because indeed most employees, their sense of purpose in the organization is linked to customers, right? Because I'm making the impact on you or I'm helping my colleague. So I think that's a really easy bridge into maybe something that's indeed more abstract like purpose. I think, but I'm curious what you think. I think it's fine to start purpose maybe, I wouldn't say on a transactional level because it's more emotional, but maybe more on a functional level. Hey, in my daily work, where can I find purpose? And then take it from there.
Sure. I've also been really overwhelmed personally by how much the story matters to my energy. It's like I used to think about my teaching as a little bit of a necessary evil. Unfortunately, I was brainwashed a bit. When I was getting my PhD, I was kind of convinced that really the professor's job is to do research. A grad student can do the teaching. That's cleanup. That's mop-up work. The big thoughts and the big contributions of these publications, which, by the way, nobody reads. It's a sad story.
I know. That was my PhD challenge as well.
Yeah, I bet. So you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So anyway, I was a very big success publishing in these journals that nobody reads, and I got tenure and so on. But when I really thought about the teaching, it was almost like I could do more research if it weren't for this crap part. Well, that's not going to be an inspired teacher. That's somebody that wants out as soon as possible.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a cage.
You're checking the box.
And somehow the same human, me, in the same job, teaching the same topic, human resource management. When I started thinking of the story as helping people put more living into life, I felt energy shift in what I brought in. My eyes were lit up. I'd go home excited instead of like wrung out. I used to, after an 8-hour day of teaching, I used to feel wrung out inside, used up. Now I go home happier than I came in. I literally am like more bubbly going home now. And it's the same human in the same amount of hours and the same job. And there's magic there. I mean, it's almost alchemy.
It's really cool. You use the word magic because the book I just referenced, he also said literally, then magical things happen, right? Indeed, if you get people to understand their purpose.
Let's think about do you ever think about the definition of the word magic? Like, have you ever?
No.
Like, I've thought a little bit about how it means that you're creating a big impact, but you don't understand how. It's like things that we don't get yet that are powerful. I think that in a way, science's job is to unweave magic. Like if you think about it.
That's so cool. Nice way of describing it.
Right? If you think about like back in the day, say you went back 40,000 years, the sun still rose. And it probably seemed like magic. Because you didn't even know it was a sun. Like nobody knew. It's just a thing that came up every day. And it's magic. But then you learn through physics and through astrophysics. Okay, it's a big ball and it creates energy and blah, blah, blah. But there's so many things we still don't understand, and we call those magic. And I feel like this is almost one of them. This is like a frontier inside human emotions. And something energizes us and gives us the life power to thrill and create joy. And so something does that.
Yeah.
And we just don't understand it very well yet. And maybe purpose, as we unpack it more and more and more scientifically, is... It's not that it's magic. It's just it's misunderstood right now. It's not understood yet.
Yeah, and I think also, especially even when it happens with a larger group, right? Where something starts to accelerate, people start igniting each other.
It's a contagion.
It's contagion, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
We know that emotional contagion is a phenomenon. That's science now. We know that human emotions are catching.
Yeah.
And that especially when there's a certain figure being watched, let's say the leader.
Yeah.
We don't even know we're doing it, but we're watching their face for how they're feeling. And if they're not inspired by purpose and animated by purpose, it's going to be pretty hard for them to get us to buy it with a slogan.
Yeah.
But if they're feeling it and they're acting it, they're emoting it, it might even be hormonal and chemical.
Yeah.
We know that kids start copying emotions at 3 days.
Really?
3 days old.
That's really young.
So that means it's built in the same way that a bird knows to nest or a baby goat knows to suckle.
Yeah.
These aren't things that are taught.
Yeah.
They just are.
Yeah.
So evolved.
Yeah.
And I genuinely believe this. I know it's a little woo-woo, California, but I genuinely believe that it could be hormonal or chemical, but somehow emotions bleed out and people catch them, and then it affects the way the group acts.
Yeah.
And that also would be very hard to duplicate.
Yeah.
So if one organization, say a Best Buy, is now animated by purpose, and then another organization says, we want those profits, let's just act like them. They can copy the stock. They can copy the store.
Copy the prize.
It's very hard to copy the animating sense of purpose because it's kind of magical. Like, where do you put it?
Doing the formula.
Who does what when?
Yeah.
What's the script? And I really think that's why that animates me about what we're doing, even right now, but also about like what you're doing, what we're doing together with an organization. It kind of shows that we're on some vanguard of important, powerful stuff that we don't yet understand, but somehow we know how to help unleash it.
Yeah.
We don't know the formula, do we? Because it's not like physics. It's not deterministic.
And for me, what also resonates, what's so crucial, I think, is the authenticity, right? So that indeed, as a leader, if you are standing in front of the group, people feel, even if you don't think so, but people feel very, very clearly if it's a sincere purpose, emotion, or if it's, hey, I read this book from Dan Cable last month and I'm just going to copy the tip that he gave me, right?
That's right. Why do you think that is?
Well, I would say that also is, I think, something in the DNA and maybe, but I'm no expert in evolution, but you had to be very clear in quickly checking, hey, is this safe or not?
Trustworthy.
Exactly. I can quickly feel bullshit or not.
That's it.
Yeah.
I think it's authenticity detection.
Yeah.
And there's like an arms race.
Yeah.
Because for every time you get better at detecting them, they get better at tricking you.
Yeah.
And it's like, and so we have a very highly honed ability to see and feel if somebody means it.
Yeah.
I think that's so compelling. Is it in twinkles in the eye?
Yeah.
Or like the Duchenne muscles? Like there's things that we look for that let us know that can't be faked.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think also because, and I don't know, maybe it's also because leaders have been trained, financial, strong leader, that also the times where you really have a vulnerable, authentic leader, it's also sort of so special that it stands out immediately.
Rare. It's still rare.
Yeah.
I wonder if you and I are successful and we bring all the leaders along this journey. I wonder if it stops having the magical powers.
No, let's not end the podcast on that negative assumption, Dan.
We have to explore all options on it. We're scientists. It's science.
Let's hope maybe in 50 years, right?
Yes.
that happens.
We'll have wrung out the towel of purpose. We have to find a new topic.
Exactly.
We'll be so old.
We'll figure it out. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah. Okay, I have no idea where we are in time, but let's sort of roughly design towards ending our conversation.
Let's land this thing softly.
Okay, again, we're focusing on the CEO who has the courage. I'm willing to go for human centricity. Let's make it super tangible. What would be the one thing that the CEO should start doing tomorrow? What could be like a super simple tip?
Okay. Well, let me give a tip, but also a mindset.
Okay.
The mindset's probably more important.
Yeah.
I think that a leader would have to have the mindset of wanting to be curious about how employees would view the solution. Like, I think it's really good for the leader to have an impact that they're trying to create in the world. What's the intent?
Yeah.
What's this thing supposed to do? And really can be strong about that. And ideally, they'd believe it.
Yeah.
Not just doing it for the yacht. They would actually want to improve society in some way, or even frankly, just make loads of money. Just really, really have a plan that let's all get rich. You know, if they really just were honest about that.
It has to be a sincere drive, right?
Yeah, they have to really, really want it. And then you try to talk with people about, like, what do you all think would work? Like, if everybody in everybody's job thought about what they do, like, what could you do to help get there?
Yeah.
And really listen. Like, not listen to trick them into feeling empowered.
Yeah, exactly.
But, like, really try to get new habits.
Yeah.
You're really good at that. You could say some things about that, the power of those little habits. Micro moves that have big impact. And then you allowed them, you actually gave the space to try that, and then watch the results and keep the things that worked and do more of those. And it's almost like it's a mindset of what a leader is for.
Yeah.
Because I just know, and I have to be honest, I used to teach it this way even, what leadership was, is the leader had to have the answer.
Yeah.
And the leader's job was then to get everybody motivated to do his or her solution.
Yeah.
This is a really different mindset.
Yeah.
Maybe that's part of the humility that we're talking about, to be able to say, I know what I want.
Yeah,
I don't
know the
how to get
direction.
there. Yeah. So that's exciting, that mindset. And maybe there are even behaviors in that. But I wondered if, I'm making this up a little bit.
Yeah.
I'll say that this is not evidence-based, but
Yeah.
I wonder if a leader could sit down with each employee and say, talk me through your customer. Like, who would you say you serve? And how do you try to serve them even better? Like, what are some things, if you had a little more time, what could you do?
Yeah.
And just listen. How can I help you do that better, more often? You know, how do I serve you in creating your job's goals or whatever?
Yeah. How do I remove any blocks, right? What's blocking you from giving the best customer experience right now?
I once talked to this one leader, he was a CEO in this case, where once a year he talked with each of the employees, just set up an hour, and he would talk with them. First, let's talk about your customer. And then let's talk about your customer's customer. Who do they serve?
Yeah.
Because most people didn't know.
Yeah.
Even a lot of times, even salespeople who definitely know who their customer is, they haven't thought the next step in the value chain. Like, I could help them better if I knew how they were using.
Yeah.
And so he would just talk with them. So it's not financial. You're not paying money for that. You're just using your time as a leader differently.
Yeah.
But it really proves, the time investment proves that you think this is an important use of time.
You're invested. Yeah.
So those are just some ideas.
Yeah.
Could you say one that you think, I'd love to hear from you, like, what do you think is a top tip in terms of a leader starting its journey? What's like the one thing that you might recommend?
Yeah, I think one, talking about tiny habits, I think one habit, and then I also have one other example, which is not tiny, but I thought it was a really cool example. I think one tiny habit could be, let's just decide for yourself that once a week, I'm asking one employee, dear employee, hey, looking back the last week, when did you feel you had the biggest impact on the customer? Right, that might take you 5 minutes.
That's great.
Then you have individual impact on that employee. But if you then make a short video or an email or a tiny blog and you share it with the company, what did you learn, you as a CEO, from that conversation? Then you're impacting everybody.
That's really nice. You could do it in group meetings. You could go around.
You could have lunch, exactly.
Each person could just talk, like you said, 3 minutes, 5 minutes. But when did you feel most lit up around your job and like the impact you had? It's pretty cool.
And the other example that I'm stealing from somebody who showed this example to me is they were doing this in their organization where the CEO had, I think like once a month, a 1 hour online conversation with the customer, and all the employees could just join and listen in. I think that's also a really nice
They wouldn't
nice
say
example.
anything, but they could just listen in.
Yeah, so the CEO was talking to the customer, asking how do you experience our organization. Everybody was just listening in.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
And again, not very expensive.
Exactly.
Also, by the way, Zanna, this is so cool. When you go down this path of involving the customer more, a lot of times the customer feels more heard.
Yeah.
So it even wins in that sense. Microsoft goes on site to a hospital. They interview doctors and nurses and scheduling assistants and janitors. All of those people feel heard and valued.
Yeah.
So it's almost like its own reward there.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
worth the time investment right there. So this notion of being creative and innovative, not about products, but about purpose, is a real important mindset for a leader. To not think that it's a script that they write, but more, given this job, given this industry, given our company, given our culture, how can I help inject purpose in 20 ways this year?
Yeah.
Not in one kickoff event.
Exactly.
But in 20 little ways. How do I
structurally
put it into meetings? How do I put it into lunches? How do I put it into customer conversations? How do I...
Yeah.
I think it's going to be different depending on industry, nation.
Yeah.
One thing I think is that the inspirational nature of purpose changes if you're in Australia versus Japan, if you're in the US versus Kuwait. I think there's different approaches that might work. That doesn't say that purpose isn't equally important, but what works in the US may not work in the UK.
I think to me, one thing that really energized me is that, so when I was working with Randstad at the time, we did research across 20 plus countries, literally from Tokyo to Argentina, so very different cultures. And what really gave me a lot of hope is that seeing my dream, right, to make sure that companies treat people well, is that across all those very different cultures, 3 things were the same. The number one driver for customers was all around this human thing. Treat me with respect, give me personal attention, treat me as a person, not as a number. It was the same in the B2B, in the business context, but then it changed a bit, still personal attention, but also understand my company's culture. But also how we activate it. We just talked about tiny habits, emotional contagion, your best self. It was also completely universal. So I think we are working on on a topic that's so basic on a human level, that's very generic across the globe.
Thanks for saying that. That's a genuinely interesting thought, which is it's only recently we got countries.
Yeah.
That's a really new phenomenon, like evolution.
Yeah.
Millions of years, countries, what?
Yeah.
3,000?
Yeah.
2,000? Like,
I don't know.
Countries aren't too old.
That's for sure.
Tribes are older. But we didn't used to have little funny borders that we drew on maps.
Exactly.
We didn't even used to draw things. You know what I mean? That's all real reasons.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
So our brains, I like what you're saying, is the bottom line. I'm inspired by what you said because what links us is far greater than what separates us when it comes to these emotions.
Yeah.
Great.
That's always what I'm saying. Maybe that's a nice way to end. I'm always saying there's so much more also with the current state of the world. There's so much more that connects us than what sets us apart. Let's focus on that. Well, my dear Dan, I think we can keep chatting for a week. So let's not kill our listeners with too many hours of chatting.
Too much joy. It's too much joy.
Thanks so much. I hope it was valuable to everybody listening. And again, thanks so much for your time. And we'll be in touch for sure.
My pleasure.
Thanks.